Hi. So we know that we can write data, but we also want to be able to read the data. So maybe we want to do something like this. Again, this will ensure that we actually have some data. And what we could end up doing here is saying, hey, look, we want to read. And we're going to end up reading. And all we need here to read this data, and again, we're assuming that it's going to be an array of data, and it's going to be JSON data. We'll put in file. And here we expect this to be our users, which we can log out. And of course, this function is not going to exist. Read is not defined. Read is going to look similar to write. With read, we're only going to take a file path. And again, we're going to permissify not the file write, but the file read. So again, we want to return a new promise. This function gets passed, right? We don't call this callback function, but we get passed a resolve and a reject. And it's up to us to do the resolving or the rejecting. And what we'll end up doing here is we'll ask the question. We'll do fs read file path. This is either going to get an error or some data. And we can get a couple of different errors here that we'll put in here. So one of the things we could end up doing here is saying, hey, look, if there's an error, what we could end up doing is we could just get out of there, but we're going to reject it with the error. What would be an error? Well, maybe the file that we put in doesn't exist. Could probably test this out by adding something to the end of this. And it tells us that this file doesn't exist, which it doesn't. Let's do one where the file does exist. Right, and we're just waiting there because we haven't handled the success. So we don't have an error. And we are going to have some data. So one thing that we want to do is we might have an error if we attempt to parse this data. So here I'm actually going to use a try catch because you don't have JSON data. Stringify is pretty friendly. Parsing is not quite as friendly. So I'm going to go over here and I'll say, let's call this results. And I'll go over and I'll say, hey, look, I'm going to try to say results json.parse data to string. And if I'm successful here, let's resolve the results. That looks good. We have our data back here, but let's just take care of whether or not we would have a problem. So what might be some issues? Well, one of them might end up being that we're not able to parse the data, in which case we can, again, get out of here by saying reject with whatever the exception is. We should also put something in here, something along the lines of if array is array, if it's not an array, we expect our results to be an array, then again, we're done. Nothing else to do. We're going to return. We're going to get out of there. We're not returning, but we don't want to run any other code. We don't want to make it down to this resolve block. So we're going to return, and we're going to reject data must be an array. Again, we don't expect to see that error. But one of the things that we could do, and this would be sort of a read functionality for storing an array of data, and just to sort of test this out a little bit more, we could read our users. And just to go a step further, if we go over here, how do we save data back? Well, we've got our users. We can push a new user. And we could go over here and we could say we want to return and we want to write. Again, we're going to write back to the same file. And we're going to write back our users, which we ended up reading from. That's the only way that this is going to end up getting saved back. We could put it in here. And I'm going to do a console.log saved shep because that's what we're attempting to do here. And we see we saved shep, and even if we go over here and we look at our data, we'll see that shep is here. So, you know, in the end analysis, right, we've got this function, maybe 6 or 7 lines for each function. That's got a little bit of validation in here to make sure that at least we have an array and things are going to be parsable as JSON data. But we have a way of storing data, persisting it, to create something that would sort of function as a very basic database structure.